Well, that was pretty much on the nose, wasn't it? So, lecture 4 of MS232, Social Media Cultures, imaginatively titled Culture, Alienation, Boredom and Despair. I will get there in the end. It's late on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of November. It's dark outside. Just cut me some slack. This is going to be pretty brutal. I wish I was doing this in person. I really wish I was doing it in person. I think it loses some of the impact when I'm going to do it on video. But these are the times that we live in, and this is what I've got to contend with, so we'll crack on. This lecture is going to be brutal, but it's needed. The sort of dark side of social media is something that we really need to get into in this module in terms of culture and its cultural effects. I'm going to talk about nihilism and the inherent nihilistic drive of social media itself, which is kind of grim. I'm going to talk about sadness and how social media is designed from the bottom up to make you feel sad. And that's going to hopefully prompt you to really question your practices of social media use. I'm going to talk about social media addiction and how social media is designed to make you into a junkie. And that, I hope, is also going to make you question your usage. And I take no responsibility in life. But also, I take no responsibility for the despair you're going to feel at the end of this couple of videos that I've done for this week 4 lecture. I probably should, but then that's my nihilism. Live with it. So, we live in a society where social media is an integral part of everyday life. And so therefore, life on social media needs to be interrogated and investigated. One of my favorite books on this topic is Geert Loving's Sad by Design from 2019. And even on page 1, Loving lays out his thesis. Social media is the new normal. Social media is life. It's reformatting our interior lives, that is that inside of us. The platform and the individual are now inseparable as networked individuality. What we do on these platforms is part of who we are as an individual. This kind of follows up from last week's lectures with Irving Goffman and so on, and the presentation of everyday life and the presentation of self in everyday life. We are inseparable from the platform now. Social media has become the social for Geert Loving, going back to the first lecture when we defined what the social in social media is. For Loving, the social is now social media. Quoting from Gramsci, the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great deal and variety of morbid symptoms appear. Social media maintains us in a morbid stasis, where new life cannot be born and we just simply repeat over and over again the same patterns of life. I told you this was going to be grim. So in terms of the politics of social media, what do we have? Social media is dominated by two political models. The American power concentration in corporations, Facebook, Twitter, Google, and the Chinese government surveillance and control, where social media is inverted down to the policies of the state and serves the function of being state apparatus. And the citizen or the user actually exists in neither of these models. We don't have a role in them. We are simply there as fodder to produce data, but we are either controlled by corporation or controlled by the state through surveillance. We have no agency in either of these models. So politically, social media views us no matter which dominant model of social media you take, politically we are viewed purely as pawns to be played on the chess game. We are there to be controlled or surveilled. We have no agency of our own. This ties into one of the most important arguments made in the last few years in academia in general in this field, Shoshana Zuboff's Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Zuboff claims in the Age of Surveillance Capitalism that there's a new economic order that's emerged over the past 20 years that claims human experience, that what we do, what makes us who we are, as a free raw material for the hidden commercial practices of extraction, prediction, and sales. Everything that we do is now served up to companies on a plate for them to make money from. This is a parasitic economic logic in which the production of goods and services is completely subordinate to a new global architecture of behavioral modification. And Zuboff has social media right at the middle of this. You know, social media's role is to extract our life experiences for prediction of what we're going to do in the future and sale to companies who can use those predictions. And we are modified behaviorally because of this. So this is a rogue mutation of capitalism, marked by contradictions of wealth, knowledge, and power, the very foundations of a surveillance society, which you can argue we already exist in. This is as significant as the Industrial Revolution was in itself, and a new origin of new instrumentalist power, which imposes collective order based on total certainty, based on data extraction, based on predictions that we can make from that data extraction. Zubov's ultimate conclusion is that sovereignty itself is overthrown and placed in the hands of corporations. The age of surveillance capitalism is not just to surveil us in order to make money, but is to subvert power itself into the hands of these corporations that have surveillance capitalism as their business model. See, it's going to get grimmer from here, but that is the basic outline of what Zuboff is arguing. Now, going back to the politics of social media from Gerd Loving, and he draws on the recently deceased philosopher of technology Bernard Stiegler, the speed of technological development has actually left society far, far behind. Society itself can't react to this change because it's happened so quickly. We are in the wake of it and we are reacting to it, but we're not in control of it. If you look at the works of the Invisible Committee, including their seminal work, Fuck Off Google, social media, actually, the aim of it is to have everyone isolated, not connected, but isolated from one another, immobilize bodies and keeps everyone cloistered in their signifying bubble. We receive signs and meanings from social media. We're kept in a stasis by this, but we're not able to act. We're not able to rebel against it. We're not able to form any kind of rebellion against the new symbolic order which is imposed on us. That kind of reaction is gone. The time for it is gone. This has become too entrenched. Well, we think we have access to the world, but we're actually walled off from the world itself by social media. We're given a simulation of the world. We are not part of the world itself. For Kobeck, in his novel I Hate the Internet, fundamentally what we're experiencing is alienation. People that exercise freedom of speech on social media doing nothing more than creating content they don't own for a corporation in which they have no stake in whatsoever. And that's fundamentally a very, very important point. What we do on social media, we don't own it. And we have no stake in the company that owns that content when we produce it. Kobeck goes further. Something like Instagram is the first social media platform where the only sane reaction to the lives and the kind of symbolic order we're presented with is hate. The only way to actually deal with Instagram intelligently is to hate it, to see what is presented in front of you, this perfect world which is given to you on a plate, which you can't achieve, which nobody can achieve. The only sane reaction is to hate it. Social media is a system with the purpose of maximizing the amount of bullshit people type into their phones. The greater the amount of profit social media has. Wow, this is bleak. In terms of agency and what our agency has been reduced to in the times of social media, Loving again cites on Yevgeny Morozov, another philosopher of technology. Post-truth is to the digital what pollution was to capitalism. We're exposed to lie after lie after lie, to misdirection, to misinformation continually, and this is the product of social media, and we have no way of getting out of the way of it. The multi-tooth approach to identity has produced a culture of total relativism where you can believe any lie you want and there's plenty of confirming evidence for it. But more so than that, in terms of agency, and in terms of agency, that means our agency is particularly limited because we have no access to the truth of what's going on in the world. So being agents in the world means we are limited in that way. Kobeck's argument in his novel is that fame and the internet both strip us of agency. The promise of fame, the promise of becoming an influencer, the promise of becoming a YouTuber, the promise of getting a foothold on social media, which gives us traction in the world, deludes people with images of success. But Rihanna and Beyonce are not inspirations, they are vultures. They feed on the dead corpse of human beings who are in thrall to their huge numbers of followers and their huge influence that they have. The poor are doomed to the internet. We are doomed to using the internet. The rich don't use the internet. The rich pay people to do their internet for them. Rihanna doesn't post anything. Beyonce doesn't go anywhere near Instagram. Kim Kardashian's got nothing to do with Instagram. She pays people to do it for her. The rich don't have to use the internet, but they use it in a detached sense to maintain their status. Only the poor like us actually get to use the internet, and we're trapped in it. Loving calls these kind of things pseudo events of the internet. There are no actual chronology of things on the internet. There's no beginning or middle, there's no end to anything. Everything continually accelerates and captured in cybernetic loops that go nowhere. They're just event after event after event. Trend after trend after trend. We move on from one news cycle to another news cycle. We move on from one hashtag to another hashtag, one trend to another trend, one visual trend to another trend, one video that we have to make onto the next one. These are just meaningless events which have nothing to do with reality and have nothing to do with fulfillment in our lives. These are just a simulation that we exist in. It's continually cycling forwards, it's continually accelerating. This is what Baudrillard calls a simulacrum. This is not the real. This is a virtual world which has replaced the real for us, and we are no longer in contact with the real. The real doesn't exist to us anymore, just this constant churn of pseudo events which we engage with but have no actual connection with the real. But because we're engaged with them all the time, they replace the real. So our lives aren't real in any meaningful sense. In a world of 24/7 media, the internet itself has reached hegemonic status. It is hegemony now. It is the only reality that we really understand. With 24/7 social visibility, the apparatus and application become interiorized in the body. This is a reversal of McLuhan's extension of man. We are no longer extended by media. In fact, media extends into us. The social, if you like, has imploded into the handheld device. The social itself is now our device. The social itself is the application we use on our device. There is no social out there. It is all in here. It's all we get is what we get from here. And that is controlled by corporations. It is completely artificial. It is not real in any way sensible. Can you feel the anger that I'm getting towards this? This is crazy stuff. In terms of, do we find any pleasure? Well, sure we do. But what kind of pleasure do we get? Loving's argument is that networks are not pleasure domes. In fact, the kind of enjoyment we get out of this is very dark. Now, Sean Parker, who's a vice president of Facebook and was one of the developers of Napster at the beginning of this century. Sean Parker, in an interview, once said that, Facebook was purposefully there to give us a short trigger. There was an addiction in the design of this site, and that has been copied by all other social media sites. We call this a social validation feedback loop, which exploits a vulnerability in human psychology, much like heroin does. Indeed, Snapchat, for example, is heroin. We need continual social validation to have this little short trigger, which gives us a dopamine rush. Dopamine has become the metaphor of our age, according to Loving. The neurotransmitter that's triggered when we get comments or likes on our posts stands for the accelerated up cycles in our mood, this euphoric high that we get before the inevitable crash we receive when the neurotransmitter levels go down. So we get outbursts to numbness. Constant psychological bursts like this keep you hooked on social media. You have to engage because you want the next high always. But as a result of this constant engagement where we're flicking back and forth to this meaningless simulacrum of the world, we are dead inside as individuals. We have no soul. We are constantly enthralled to our social media feeds. We feel defeated, overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, nervous, stupid, silly, useless. All of that is programmed in the platform. It's designed to make us feel that way. So we chase these highs. These mood swings are completely programmed. When we get the high, we feel great. When the high drops off, those are the feelings that we get. We feel sad about the world. We feel sad, most importantly, about ourselves. And the only cure is the next high, and we're continually trapped in this loop. You might think, well, how is that trap done? Well, near Eyal's work on how different technologies get us hooked gives us some very good examples of that. For Eyal, the habit-forming addictive technologies all employ this hook cycle: trigger, action, reward, investment. There is a trigger, the interaction which ignites an effective response, the post, the reading of a post, the comment, the like. This then gives an action, acting on the trigger to use the platform in itself. This becomes a habit over time. The reward, entertaining, useful, or stimulating, most important, stimulating up here, that flow of neurotransmitter that you want to get. And in terms of investment then, if it has value to you in producing this over time, then we're hooked on it. We're in this cycle forever. When that investment rubs off, we go back to the trigger, action, reward. We are trapped. This is exactly the model that gambling firms use in order to trap people into gambling as a habit. And addictive technologies take up this. They look to see what are the triggers we can get people to use. How can we ignite that into action? How can we get reward for that? And how we can get investment. So in terms of triggers, I mean, it's not very clear on this slide that I've presented up here on the video, but talking about Facebook triggers, externally you get notifications, internal, feeling lonely or bored, what are my friends and family up to? This leads to actions. You create an account, you type in the URL, you comment, you like, you share, you check to see if people have liked your posts. In rewards, you get likes, commitments, friend requests, invited to events, get contacted by old friends. Investments, you bookmark the site, you develop your profile, your friend network grows, you meet people, you create relationships, it's on your phone, you're continually hooked on it. Replace Facebook with Instagram, replace it with Snapchat, replace it with Twitter, replace it with whatever you want. They all use the same technique. You might think, some of you might have done this, some of you might be planning to do this as part of your project. A digital detox is a way to treat your sickness. Now, Loving draws on his former colleague, actually, Miriam Rash. Digital detox is like getting rid of social media, deleting your accounts. Only deal with the symptoms, not the pathologies. This has become systemic. This is how the world works now. This is how everything works. The push to that kind of self-discipline is actually just another strategy to increase efficiency, productivity, and profit in different ways. You're still trapped in this capitalistic system of being the most efficient human being you can be. But in reality, deleting social media is about as realistic as deleting the roads. Social media is everything. Social media is the social. Without it, you have no social. There is no such thing. And that, my friends, is extremely grim. So where does that leave us? Well, I want to leave this video on this point. Social media has an emotional tenor, there's an emotional style, there's an emotional environment to it. Now, Loving draws on Adam Greenfield's book Radical Technologies to explain this. Social media has the emotional tenor of sadness and melancholy. Sadness emerges when we're exhausted by the online world, which we continually are, because we're constantly engaged in this cycle where we're excited and we crash. It makes us exhausted. After engagement with likes, comments, and texts, we are empty and indifferent. That is designed, and therefore, we are sad by design. In the second video, I'll move away from sadness a little into boredom and nihilism, which we're also designed for. So it's probably not going to get any cheerier, but this is all important stuff. Thanks for listening.